Hey viewers, welcome to AdvoTalks Courts Bulletin. I am Siraj and we are going to bring you some important legal developments that took place across India. Let's look at the top stories. The Supreme Court of India has declined to stay the Delhi Development Authority's demolition drive to remove the encroachment from Tughlakabad area in the South Delhi. The bench comprising Justice Sanjeev Khanna and Justice M.M. Sundaresh has sought the response of the central government, Archaeological Survey of India and the Delhi Development Authority on the plea. The Supreme Court of India has rejected the plea of 2008 Bangalore blast case accused Abdul Nasser Maudani, challenging the Karnataka government's demand of deposit for providing a security cover. The government has reportedly demanded for a deposit over 60 lakh rupees to provide security cover to Maudani during his stay in Kerala for a period of nearly 90 days. The Supreme Court of India held that the third part of the Section 173, read with Section 158 of the CRPC, does not give a permission to the Home Secretary to order for a further investigation by another agency. The Apex Court clarifies that such re-investigation can only be done by the officer in charge of the concerned police station or his superior officer. The Supreme Court of India has ruled that it can exercise its powers to grant divorce on the ground of irretrievable breakdown of a marriage under Article 142(1) of the Constitution of India, and the court can exercise these powers whether the divorce is by mutual consent or even if one of the parties contend it. The Calcutta High Court recently held that if a man tells his live-in partner that he will marry her after filing for divorce from his wife and fails to do so, he cannot be charged for cheating under the Section 417 of CRPC. A UP man has moved Supreme Court for anticipatory bail after his wife revives her rape complaint filed against him before their marriage. The first FIR was filed for a rape on the pretext of marriage and was closed after a compromise was reached. After being married for about 2 years, the wife filed another FIR arising from the same offence. In a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court of India stated that an accused shall not be entitled to a default bail on the ground that the charge sheet filed against him or her is without the sanction of a valid authority. The Supreme Court has recently set aside a judgment of the Tripura High Court which directed the state government to raise the retirement age of Anganwadi workers from the present 60 years to 65 years. The women wrestler petitioners who are seeking registration of an FIR against Wrestling Federation of India President Brij Bhushan Singh over an alleged sexual harassment have sought a permission to file an affidavit in a sealed cover at the Supreme Court. The request was mentioned before a bench comprising CJI, D.Y. Chandrachud and Justice P.S. Narasimha. After initially expressing a reluctance in the Bilkis Bano case, the Union government and the Gujarat government have agreed to share the files on suspension of 11 life convicts. At the Supreme Court of India, few petitioners claim that despite clarifying the court that surrogate mother need not be a genetically related to child, the central government of India has refused to issue a notification. The Supreme Court recently refused to commute the death penalty handed down to Balwant Singh Rajouna, who was convicted for the assassination of former Punjab Chief Minister Beyant Singh. At the Supreme Court of India, CJI D.Y. Chandrachud said that the court will consider the request to set up a 7-judge bench on passage of laws as money bills. Interestingly, CJI Chandrachud, who was then a dissenting judge who ruled in the Aadhaar case, has mentioned that the Aadhaar Act could not have been passed as money bill. The central government of India agrees to consider the grant of certain rights to the same-sex couples without a legal recognition of the marriage. The Supreme Court, however, clarified that the court will decide on the constitutional issue of the same-sex marriage, regardless of the concessions that the government makes. In a public interest litigation plea challenging the CBFC certification granted to the controversial film The Kerala Story, the Supreme Court refused to consider the plea and said that the courts should be very careful while staying the exhibition of the films. The apex court mentioned that the producers have invested money in the movie and the actors have dedicated their labor, and it is for the public to decide whether the film is up to the mark or not. The Patna High Court has issued a stay on the caste-based census in its interim order while hearing a petition challenging the caste-based survey in the state of Bihar. A bench at the Supreme Court of India issued notices in the bail pleas by anti-caste activist and musical performer Jyoti Jagtap and a women's rights activist cum academician Shoma Sen. Notices were issued to the National Investigation Agency and the state of Maharashtra. The Supreme Court recently stayed an Allahabad High Court's order directing the schools in Uttar Pradesh to refund or adjust 15% of the excess fees collected during the academic session of 2020-2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud has written to various high courts to take administrative actions to ensure the access to hybrid hearings in the high courts. The Bombay High Court mentioned that delay in the disposal of applications under the Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest Act impacts the financial health of the country. The court issued directions to streamline the disposal of applications filed under Section 14 of the SurfaceC Act and to effectuate the intent of the legislation. The Supreme Court orally sought an update from the central government on the status of a proposed bill on the prevention of trafficking and rehabilitation of the sex workers. During a hearing, Justice Gavai remarked, once that act is enacted, many of the aspects will be taken care and we will also know our limitations. The Guwahati High Court has rejected the anticipatory bail application of Indian Youth Congress President B.V. Srinivas in the harassment case filed by the organization's expelled Assam Unit Chief, Ankita Datta. The BJP MLA has filed a petition at the Supreme Court of India against the Manipur High Court order on recommending scheduled tribes status for Meiteis community. Currently, only the tribes hailing from the hill districts of the northeastern border state are on the ST list. The Punjab and Haryana High Court has granted an interim bail to the Times Now reporter Bhavna Kishore, who was arrested by the Punjab police for allegedly knocking down a Dalit woman with her car and for verbally abusing her. The National Green Tribunal has imposed 4,000 crore rupees compensation on Bihar government for its failure in scientifically managing the liquid and solid waste. Noting that the appellant had already suffered at the cruel hands of fate, the Supreme Court of India recently set aside the order of the Tamil Nadu government rejecting a convict mother's prayer for premature release, who poisoned two of her children. The Supreme Court bench comprising Justice M.R. Shah and Justice C.T. Ravikumar has ruled that a dispute between defendants regarding the validity of a sale deed cannot be considered in a suit filed by the plaintiff for the possession. Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud, on the inauguration of a two-day national conference on digitization, mentioned that the judges need to be careful to avoid using gender inappropriate terms in the court. The Supreme Court recently observed that only a magistrate or a higher court has the power to order further investigation into a case and not an investigation agency. The apex court mentioned that the district police chief cannot order further investigation without a permission of the magistrate or a higher court. The Madras High Court ruled that the National Commission for Scheduled Castes has the authority to look into any complaint it receives, but the Commission is not authorized to issue either a temporary or a permanent injunction. The National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission has reiterated that an arbitration clause in the agreement does not bar the jurisdiction of the Consumer Court to entertain the complaint. Justice R.K. Agarwal has dismissed the interlocutory argument filed by the opposite party developer, seeking permission to refer the case to an arbitrator. The National Green Tribunal orders Ludhiana District Magistrate to pay a compensation of 20 lakh rupees each to the kin of the 11 people who died in the gas leak incident. The Gujarat High Court has directed the Indian Institute of Technology Guwahati to accept the application of a candidate for the JEE Advanced Examination whose answer sheet for the JEE Mains examination indicated that he had purportedly not attempted even a single question due to technical glitch. The Orissa High Court has expressed concerns that very young children are vulnerable to diseases and many have lost their lives due to the malnutrition, and this requires an immediate attention. The Supreme Court has ruled that Nycil prickly heat powder is a medicated talcum powder but not a medicine under Kerala General Sales Tax Act 1963. The Supreme Court has agreed to examine the plea of a 72-year-old woman on whom a male co-passenger urinated on board an Air India flight in November last year. The apex court has issued notices to the Centre, Aviation Regulator DGCA and the airlines seeking directions to frame an SOP to deal with such incidents. The Centre and the Kendriya Vidyalaya Sangathan have told the Delhi High Court that the appointment of special educators in its schools for teaching disabled students is under active consideration of the authorities. As courts struggle to clear the backlog of cases, the Supreme Court of India said that at least 40% of the litigations pursued by the central and the state governments were frivolous. The bench observed that the government is filing to deny 700 rupees per month to someone and spending 7 lakh rupees of taxpayers' money for the procedure. The Supreme Court of India ruled that Bar Association restraining lawyers from defending accused is a contempt of court. That's all for now. For getting more updates, press the bell icon. Do like and share the videos on our YouTube channel, AdvoTalks.